All right, it's my pleasure to introduce Ken and Janet, and we'll begin with the first question. Please tell us about your personal prayer life. Do you think it is important for the bishop to encourage and support both clergy and laity to cultivate their prayer lives? And if so, how would you do that?
Well, I'd like to start by cultivating our prayer life by praying. Would you join me? The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for sending your Spirit here. And we ask you to give us the gift of awareness of your presence. Pour out your mercy upon us. Give us your vision for your people, we ask. In Jesus' name. Amen. Can I stand?
Yeah, oh yeah, everybody else just walked around.
Oh, okay, good. My personal prayer life is intentional and flexible. What I mean by that is I choose my spiritual disciplines, all of my spiritual disciplines, very carefully, and then I stick with them for a good long time, and when they stop being effectively connecting, when they stop effectively connecting me to God, then I do something else. Right now, my prayer practice is that when I get up in the morning, I read part of the daily office and the scriptures for the day, and then I go for a walk with the dog. And when I come back, I do a little yoga, and then I help the kids get off to school, and then before I go to work, I take some time in silence and journaling. So that's my current personal prayer practice. Incorporated into that are the prayers that I pray as a member of the Society of the Companions of the Holy Cross. So I've been a companion almost exactly as long as I've been married, 22 years. And both of those commitments are really important to me. So there's a rule of life. We companions have a rule of life that includes simplicity and social justice and intercessory prayer. And so that's part of my prayer discipline as well. I do think that it is important for bishops and clergy to encourage lay folks in their prayer life, and I think it is important for lay folks to encourage your clergy in their prayer life. The goal of this whole exercise is to be consistently connected to the voice of our loving, liberating, life-giving God. And so we need to be able to talk about when we're feeling that connection and when we're not, and to help each other get back in the flow of that connection with whatever spiritual discipline, whatever prayer practice we need to have to do that.
So our current policy in the diocese is full inclusion of our LGBT members, including ordination and clergy officiating at same-gender marriages if they wish to do so. What is your position on these issues? What would your directives to the diocese be on this issue?
Hallelujah. We are now living into the gospel message, I think, which is God loves every person, all the time. And each of us is formed in the image of God, made for the purposes of God, and we're supposed to love each other in that frame of mind. So full inclusion is the kingdom of heaven on earth. And we're supposed to be not only allowing it, we're supposed to be creating it and inviting it, that atmosphere of full inclusion. You might be surprised to know that the Diocese of Fort Worth practices full inclusion. We have congregations that particularly are some of our rural congregations, but some of our urban congregations as well, that struggle with this. And so inclusion, as I just said, is a practice and not just something you are or you're not. As the canon to the ordinary in our diocese, I'm also the transition ministry officer. And recently, one of our congregations, one of our rural congregations, went through a transition and a search process for a new rector. And for the first time, they had a slate of candidates that weren't all straight white males. And they discerned that the best candidate among them was the candidate that most surprised them by his difference from some of them. And so it was a conversation, it was a long conversation that I helped lead them through about how they would come to call, and they did come to call, a partner gay rector. And it's going really well. Not that there are not some struggles along the way, but that it is really a beautiful, beautiful thing. And it's something that we not only have done together, but it's something that we are doing together. Because as I said, inclusion is a practice and an ongoing work. So the question I always want to ask folks is, who's on the margin in your congregation? And how are you drawing them in? We often do a better job with the issue. I hate to use that word, but with whatever we're focusing on, we all often do a better job of that than we do of really watching for who's on the margins and bringing them in.
Thank you. This is question number 3. The last General Convention encouraged the trial and use of alternative liturgies. Our diocese has tended to stick with the liturgies from the Book of Common Prayer and enriching our worship, with a few alternative additions for certain seasons. What is your opinion on the use of alternative liturgies within a diocese? Do you see liturgical renewal as important in the life of our diocese? And what would your directions be with regard to alternatives?
So I'm curious, how many of you have congregations that have services that are Rite 1? 1? Rite 2? What about alternative liturgies? Consistently using alternative liturgies. Okay. So in the Diocese of Fort Worth, we happen to be practicing all of these in various congregations, and we have one congregation that still uses the 1928 prayer book, which is really, you need to hear their story to understand why that's good for them. But there are reasons that the bishop has not helped them yet find their way forward to something else. Most importantly, liturgy is intentional and as excellent as it can possibly be. By that, I do not mean fussy. What I mean is that we understand what it is that we're trying to communicate with our liturgy, and that we're doing that. Liturgical renewal starts often not with changing up the service, like going from one type of service to another. But liturgical renewal often starts with understanding why we're doing what we're doing, with instructive Eucharists, and with people telling stories about why the liturgy you're doing is important to you. What part of the liturgy just makes your heart sing? What part of the liturgy do you wait for every Sunday? I came into the Episcopal Church in a congregation that was doing a Rite 2 liturgy, at least at the service I was attending. And it wasn't until I was regularly a clergy in a congregation that I started leading Rite 1 liturgy. And the prayer of humble access has a very particular meaning for me, and it's a very special gift to me. Not everybody likes it, but for me, that really speaks to my heart. So, I should answer the part about directives. As a canon to the ordinary, if I were your bishop, I'm not big on giving directives. So my bishop and I try to say yes as often as possible because we believe that local knowledge, your understanding of what your community needs, is that's where it is. And so we want to have conversations with you to help you understand yourselves, help to surface the reasoning behind what you're doing. But we have discovered that top-down directives are not all that effective.
All right, so this is question number 4. How would you support, empower, and care for ECR's vocational deacons and their varied ministries?
So we didn't entirely tell the truth. This question was there last night too, in a slightly different form. And it's interesting to me because what that signals to me is that this is probably an issue, that there's some conversation that is either being had or needs to be had about the role of deacons in your diocese. How many of your congregations currently have a deacon? Wow, that's great. Oh, wait a minute. I think I heard a story about, like, you all being kind of the place that has deacons. Is that like the deanery that has deacons? More here than in other places. Is that true? No? Okay. So you have managed something then that not a lot of dioceses have managed. And that is that you're raising up deacons. Or is it that you raised up deacons and now you need to raise up more? That's the thing. Okay. So for me, we don't raise up deacons and priests in isolation. We raise up and learn to dialogue about the vocations of all the baptized. We talk about God's purpose and calling for each of us as children of God, as members of the family of God. And then, as we have those conversations, people discern into specific roles, lay roles and ordained roles. And it starts to happen in congregations that if somebody says, hey, that person should be a deacon. I hope you'll consider being a priest. I hope you'll consider being the head of the altar guild. I hope you'll consider being a person that leads a Bible study or a book study in a coffee shop downtown. That's how vocation grows, and our understanding of what the call of God in our lives is grows.
Question number 5. What do you believe have been your major accomplishments in life and in leadership in the church? And what skills and abilities have most helped you in these accomplishments?
P.S. Be humble. It doesn't say that on the card. I think my major accomplishment in life is that I've been willing to go where God has called me. And if you had asked me when I was 5 years old, 10 years old, 20 years old, 25 years old, you would not have heard me say, I'm going to be a priest. For one thing, I had hardly seen any women in leadership. I was raised in the Church of the Nazarene, and women were not pastors. When I got to the Episcopal Church, there were not very many women priests in the Diocese of Oregon, at least not where I was living. And no one in my congregation, though my congregation had sponsored a lot of people for ordination, they hadn't really sponsored any women. So, but when other people identified that call in me, I was willing to say yes, even though I didn't really know what I was going to get into. I really thought, when I went to seminary, I thought, I'll be a hospital chaplain. Because I know what that is, and I could do that, and I'd enjoy it. And what God had in store for me was using my gifts for leadership. that I hadn't even allowed to surface, that my context had not really allowed to surface. So I think being willing to go is my biggest accomplishment. And being willing to be the first one in a lot of places. And to be able to not make that the issue. Right? To be focused on just doing the best I could. So, at whatever I was called to. And I feel so blessed that I've been called, that I want all of our folks to be called, to know that you're called to a ministry for the good of God's people and for the glory of God. Skills and abilities. I'm a pretty good listener. I think it's the key thing that links me with folks is that I'm terribly curious. And I want to listen. I want to know. And I really desperately want things to work. I want people in our congregations to know the love of God. And that means I want to help the pieces work together well so that we can focus most on the things that most need our attention and the people that most need our attention. And I'm a leader, as it turns out. I lead in partnership. I don't go alone. And that means when I make mistakes, somebody else catches them. And when I do things right, somebody encourages me for the next leg of the journey. Thank you.
And then last but not least, what are your thoughts about the Episcopal Church as the Episcopal branch of the Jesus movement? How have you embraced this new understanding of evangelism? And are you familiar with the Reclaiming Jesus statement? And do you think it has a place in our diocese?
Actually, I think this understanding of evangelism isn't new. The Jesus movement started with Jesus, and it continues as a movement. We are followers of Jesus. We are God's people on the way to wherever God is calling us to be for that season, for his people in that time and place. So it's a constant process of discernment. It's fluid, and it's meant to be something that we engage in together. And I really appreciate the gift that Bishop Curry has given us of painting us a picture of God's people on the move and of following a loving, liberating, life-giving God. Basically, I feel like he's opened the floodgates to our creativity, and he just keeps putting the question forward to us. Are you familiar with the Way of Love material? So there's now a curriculum, if you will, to help folks think about what it means to be living on the way. And it's really about spiritual disciplines and prayer and rest and scripture. So it's all on the web. If you type in Way of Love on your computer, you'll get all of this stuff. But it's meant to really help pull us forward in this conversation. A conversation which I think isn't bounded by diocese, it's not bounded by congregation, but in these organisms, in these organizations, we have opportunities to come together and do something for the good of God's people and for the glory of God.
Thank you. Allison, we have time for one question. Is there a question out there?
Come on, Carol.
Because she asked this question for
Carol. No, so, care of creation.
Yes.
What's the church's role?
Hang on, I'm going to repeat that. Care of creation, what is the church's role?
The church's role is to hear, the church's role always is to hear the voice of God and try to live into it. We have not been very faithful as Americans as Episcopalians in a consumerist culture of taking care of the great treasures that we have been given. And I believe that the Episcopal Church and all of our Christian churches are called to lead forward in our communities, to be a light that says, you can do something and it can make a difference. And to practice, adopt a practice or two that is a light to the community, and then bear witness to what's happening with that. Because the thing about something like care of creation is, it's such a big issue that we feel defeated before we even got started. And the way synergy happens, the way a movement happens, the way things really change, is that we pick something. And as a congregation, we have some force if we pick something together. So we pick something, a practice, of picking up litter along the highway, a practicing, whatever your practice is, you do it together, and then you bear witness, not just to the fact that you've done it, but to what has happened in your soul as you have been faithful to take care of God's creation. And as we do that more and more, people hear us, and they want what we have. Christianity is supposed to be attractive, right? The Christianity is the way Jesus, well, it wasn't Christianity, but you get my point. The way Jesus lived his life with God was so attractive that people wanted to join him. Our churches can be, and often are. Can't remember, we can't sell ourselves short, and often are that, a beacon